Hello, everyone, and welcome to Literary Nights with Unsolicited Press. Before we start, I would like to remind you all to hit that like button and subscribe. If you hit the button and subscribe, you'll be notified of whenever we have a show, which takes place every other Wednesday. Also, if you want to leave a comment, please do so on whatever platform you're on. We'll be able to see it. Has written a poetry book called How to Do the Greased Wombat Slide. So, welcome, Bo and Pamela. We are looking forward to hearing your work this evening. As usual, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So, we're going to start with Bo and then Pamela. And we're going to hear some really interesting stories tonight. So, welcome. Bo, would you like to start your reading from your novel? You want to talk a little bit about your novel and what inspired it?
Sure. Inspiration. I think inspiration for this novel comes from a lot of family lore, which is always, I think, the best place to start with inspiration for a book. I think a lot of the times truth is stranger than fiction, and I think a lot of the very true stories from my family inspired this work of fiction. Today I'm going to be reading an excerpt that's actually from the very beginning of chapter 3. I thought this would be a good place to start, as it's really the first chapter where we get to hear Eudora Burleson, the protagonist, the titular character, the shotgun woman herself. This is the first time we actually get to hear her speak through dialogue, so through her own words. Chapter 1, for a bit of context, just revolves around her husband's funeral following his mysterious and untimely death. And chapter 2 is really about all of the hearsay and gossip from the perspective of these townspeople in a small town in Texas. Again, in chapter 3, we really start to get a real sense of the true Eudora through her own actions and how she handles herself. And then just a bit more, the title of this chapter is called Woman's Work, which is really a play on words that's juxtaposing the more common derogatory meaning of that phrase with the chapter's subject, which is really all about Dora's origins as a migrant laborer. She grew up working the fields of South Texas during the Great Depression as a child, obviously extremely hard work environment. And it also speaks to this idea that after the death of a spouse, it's often the women who are left behind to deal with the burdens that really come along with that. And so, this chapter picks up on Eudora in the lawyer's office, going over the estate that was left behind in the will. So I'll get into it. Chapter 3, Woman's Work. The next day, as light filtered in through the dust-laden blinds of Carl Stanwyck's law office, Eudora sat eyeing a feeble-looking rotary fan perched atop the side table. Though she'd been here a couple of times before, the drab wallpaper looked especially grim and lifeless today. Overhead, the gray-paneled ceiling, stained a sickly yellow, filled the shabby little room with an impressive and stifling presence. Since Barrett's death, Dora had spent an inordinate amount of time in rooms just like this one. The morgue, the bank, the insurance office. Sad little rooms you just couldn't wait to get out of. Once, Barrett had taken her to talk to the rabbi at the synagogue down the road. In his office, Dora was struck with the very same feeling as she had now. Just a sort of emptiness she couldn't quite explain. Years before the war, Barrett had been adamant about her conversion so that they could be married, so that they could be buried side by side on the family plot. But by the time he returned from deployment, he just didn't seem to have the stomach for religion anymore. Suppose he'd heard enough people screaming out for a God that never came. After that, the subject of conversion never really came up again, Of course, that was just fine with Dora. She'd never really seen the point in all that nonsense anyhow. Religion seemed like one big racket that had managed to fool just about everybody except her. To Dora, it was just a bunch of people dressed up in silly costumes, talking big circles about nothing, then asking for donations to boot, like snake oil salesmen, but not half as slick. No, religion wasn't for her. The white man's religion, anyway. Years ago, she'd met an old Apache man, an antiques trader, who told her the gods of his people lived upon the wind and sang amongst the trees. He said you never had to go looking for his gods because you could feel them in the rain and in the dirt beneath your feet. Dora reckoned that sounded a hell of a lot closer, and if there was a god, he'd probably be outside, not cooped up in some musty room with gray old men. If there was a heaven, surely it was in the freedom of the open sky. On the other hand, if there was a hell, Dora was sure it was a room much like this one. Leaning over in her seat, she stretched out towards the fan switch and flipped it back and forth. Still, the machine remained motionless, stagnant as the air surrounding it. Figures, Dora muttered, sinking back into her chair. Just then, the door to the office cracked open. Mrs. Burleson, a soft voice called out. Mr. Stanwick will be in to see you in just a moment. Can I get you anything in the meantime? Coffee, perhaps? Without turning from her seat, the back of Dora's head replied, Honey, it's 1 in the afternoon and 100 fucking degrees outside. No, I don't want any coffee. You can tell Carl I'll see him now. This won't take long. Without a word, the door closed with a gentle click. Just outside the thin walls, frantic and hushed whispers filled the hallway as Eudora restlessly picked the lint from her trousers. The fine pinstriped Italian fabric, while incredibly chic, also came with the unfortunate consolation of clinging to lesser-made materials. Perhaps slacks would have been a better choice. Moments later, overeager to get off to a good start, Carl Stanwick burst into the room. Exuding a trembling energy, he set about rifling through a stack of files balanced in his thin arms. He was an exceptionally plain little man, from his rather dull haircut straight down to his plain black penny loafers. In the low light of the drawn blinds, Dora could not distinguish whether his suit was gray, beige, or some other shade of lifeless neutrality, but one supposes that's what you ought to look for when you're in the market for an estate lawyer, someone who'd have no use for your money, even if he had it. Good afternoon, Dora, Carl gushed as the papers tumbled over onto his desk. Terribly sorry for the wait, and of course, as I should have probably started, I am grievously sorry for your loss. Barrett was a fine man, and I think I speak for everyone when I say the whole town is worse for it. Pausing for reply, Carl stood wringing his hands as he studied Dora's face for a sign of life. Silently, she stared back at him with a dissatisfied expression. Well, he stammered, rifling through the files on his desk. Anyways, as you well know, we have much to discuss regarding the will and the transfer of the land. The deeds and accounts must be rewritten in your name as laid out in the stipulations of the will, of course. I don't need to hear about the will, Carl, Dora interrupted with a wave of her hand. I was sitting in this here seat the day it was written, and you was sitting right there, remember? Well, yes, ma'am, I remember, Carl conceded with a nervous chuckle. Well, then perhaps first we should tackle the issue of the main stipulation of the will, which has, of course, named you as the sole beneficiary, as well as the executor of the estate and the properties at large. Sell it, Dora said coldly. Frozen by her words, Carl stopped his frantic searching among the paperwork. Slowly, his gaze rose up until it met Dora's across the table. But Ms. Burleson, the business, the properties, the farm, he stammered, cocking his head with confusion. I don't understand. This is your family's livelihood. It's Barrett's life work. Yeah, well, he's dead now, ain't he? Said Dora, rolling a piece of lint between her fingers before flicking it into the air. Besides, the hell I know about hawking real estate or running farmland. Perplexed, Carl shuffled among his files as if the answer were to be found somewhere within. Turning up no solution, he clasped his hands together beneath his chin and thought for a long while. Finally, he ventured to carry on. Dora, he began carefully, as your lawyer, I'm obliged to ask you to reconsider. That farmland, your family, I know this is a trying time and emotions can run high, which on occasion can cause us to make rash decisions. Do I look emotional to you, Carl? Dora questioned, raising her brow. As if presenting herself for inspection, she turned her open palms towards the ceiling and invited Carl to take a look. Do I look rash? Well, Carl stuttered, adjusting his glasses. No, I can't say that you do. You know, I'll tell you something a lot of folks don't know, Carl. I haven't stepped foot in them godforsaken fields in 30 odd years, and I sure as hell don't plan on starting up again now. So you listen here. If I'm the executor, as you say, Dora said, jabbing a sharp finger towards him, well, I'm telling you what I'll do. Sell it. All of it. Save for the house, the pasture, and the East Plot property. East Plot, Carl repeated, turning back to his papers. You mean that dusty lot of trailers out in Fordham? Eudora, I have to say this is ill-advised. You're essentially asking me to liquidate your most valuable holdings. Very good, Carl, exclaimed Dora, flashing her first grin of the day. Very good. I'm glad you're following along. So we're on the same page then? Well, yes, Carl managed to reply. I suppose. Satisfied with this answer, Dora provided a hearty nod of approval and rapped her knuckles atop the desk. Then, as if suddenly preparing to take her leave, she began moving towards her bag. But, Carl Tiss trying to corral her. Dora, just hold on 1 minute here. It's not so easy as all that. His mind already wandering to the mountain of work ahead, Carl began muttering almost to himself. We'll have to get each property valued and appraised. Inspections must be arranged. Of course, realtors must be acquired to sell the properties and so on. Well, yes, sir, I don't doubt it, Dora said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. And since you got such a good handle on things, I'll just leave all that to you then. Just drop the checks in my safe deposit box when they're ready and pay yourself from the checking account. But Dora, please, Carl begged. What you're asking me to do, it's a big decision. Just sleep on it and we can talk tomorrow. Oh, I'm not sleeping much these days, Carl, Dora said, drawing her sunglasses from her purse. Haven't got the time. I'm a very busy woman, you know. Just drop those checks in the safe deposit box like I told you now. Acknowledging the inevitable, Carl sunk defeated into his chair as Dora slipped out the door without even saying goodbye. Left alone in the room, he looked towards the window in silent reflection. What the hell had just happened? He kept running over the conversation in his head, though it brought him no closer to any understanding. Some minutes later, Carl's assistant, Patricia, poked her head through the door. Seeing him slumped in his chair, she already knew the answer, but figured she ought to ask the question anyways. Well, how'd it go? She said with a sheepish smile. Well, Carl said, tossing his spectacles onto the table. I don't know what I expected, but that certainly wasn't it. Leaning against the open doorway, Patricia frowned warmly. She wants to sell, Carl grumbled. Everything, pretty much. So what'll she do now? Of that, there is no telling, Carl sighed, sinking deeper into his chair. But knowing what that woman's been through, I'm not about to be the one standing in her way. And that's the excerpt for today. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. All right,
Thank
now
you.
we're going to move on to Pam, and I'm definitely looking forward to the Q&A afterwards. A little bit about Pamela. She's a poet and has 6 collection of poetry out, published. And the one that we're going to talk about this evening is titled How to Do the Greased Wombat Slide. She is from Chicago and has spent more than 40 years active in the Chicago's poetry scene. Welcome, Pamela, and we're looking forward to hearing your work.
Thank you very much, Rosalia, and thanks also to everybody at good old Unsolicited Press. You're the greatest. Let's see. My book is going to be published in literally a couple of weeks. I think the pub date is May 14th. And this is my 5th book of poems, but other than that, I'm not really sure how to describe it. The book is not about anything. It's not one of those collections where the poems are thematically linked, and they're kind of all over the place. And I don't write very much about myself or my life. So I guess probably the best thing to do would be to talk about the style of my writing. Various people have described it as surrealist, absurdist, quirky, zany. I tend to get typecast as a funny poet, quote unquote. But some people have said that a lot of my poems are sort of funny and serious at the same time, or serious and funny at the same time. So I don't know if that really helps, but I guess the best place to start would be there. Possibly some people may be wondering, okay, so how exactly do you do the greased wombat slide? So this poem will explain that. How to do the greased wombat slide. Ladies and gentlemen, here's how the dance goes. The acrobats come in through this door. The zealots come in through that door. A greased wombat slides down a pole and everybody chases after him. Desire sweeps in through this door. The debutantes mince in through that door. A greased wombat slides down a pole and their skirts burst into flames. The meek march in through this door. The earth rolls in through that door. A greased wombat slides down a pole and proclaims himself grand usurper. Our best selves waltz in through this door. Our worst selves slink in through that door. A greased wombat slides down a pole and the whole game's up for grabs. The four horsemen gallop through this door. Armageddon thunders in through that door. That goddamn wombat slides down the pole and even you won't be able to stop him. See, this next one is one of the few personal poems in the book. Everything in this poem is true, at least to some extent, shall we say. My husband, the science fiction writer, tells me about his childhood. For my husband, Richard. I grew up face down in Chicago's spongy suburbs. We ate dinner every night at the Heap O' Beef and bought clothes at the House of Sad Plaid. We vacationed down turnpikes, bland as envelopes, mailing ourselves off to some dank lake. My mother switched on her minuscule TV and watched nothing for 60 years. My dad was so cheap, he signed his name in blood, too skinflint to invest in a pen. My behemoth of a brother managed my allowance, snapping nickels in half and giving me neither. So I hunkered in the attic like Quasimodo, my defiant hair down to my knees, reading Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and the Tinfoil Hat Review, waiting for my rocket legs to sprout and blast me into breathable air, for my mind to stretch wide as a hovering spaceship, beaming me up to myself. Let's see, gotta find this next poem. I play around with a lot of different poetic forms in this book. Like, for example, there's a series of mistranslation poems. And a mistranslation is when you take a poem written in another language that you don't understand a word of, and then you write a poem in English based on what these incomprehensible words sort of suggest you or look like or sound like to you. And it's a real fun kind of poem to write, because you usually end up with this wonderful surrealistic nonsense. So this one is mistranslated from the Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. It's called Naked on Easter Sunday. Yes, it's unbecoming to primp one's own oxygen, but oh, my oblivious nerves. Pablo, I laugh at your party hat, your kleptocracy peeking through the eyes of the not yet born. Flocks of annoying pelicans, 4 tons of crinoline from Ghana. Nix, no thanks, patooey. I prefer Mexico, where I can soak my knee knobs in the ocean. That's where Alonzo popped the question. Come home with me, nymph of Ohio. Tomato of the anonymous moon, elope with me and my famous bones. I retorted, wait a minute. You're too toxic for my toboggan. It's Easter and I'm naked. Baryshnikov trembles in my palm. Thank you, darling Balthazar, for cranking up my push-pull heart. I'm the cluster bomb who loves you like no other. Let's see. You should have stuck some sticky notes in here. Okay, it's in here somewhere. Okay, another form that I use a lot of in this book is the cento, or some people pronounce it cento. For anyone who doesn't know, a cento is a poem where every line comes from another poet or several poets other than yourself. And then you take all of these lines and kind of collage them together into something new. So every line in here is from Anne Sexton. This is called Beauty at 65. Once I was beautiful, now I am myself. As I spill toward the stars in the empty years, with a singing in the head, mouths calling mine, mine, mine. Women are born twice. I am beating all my wings. I'm all one skin like a fish, secretly naming each elegant sea. 1,000 doors ago, I thought I'd die, but here I am, neither abstract nor pale, a woman of some virtue and wild breasts. Although I will inherit darkness, good news, good news. In celebration of the woman I am, I soar in hostile air. Citizen and boss of my own body still, so full of its immediate fever. Let's see. This next poem, there's a couple of things that I need to explain. There's some references in here to sort of weird animal mating behavior. Like there's this insect called the stalk-eyed fly. And when he wants to attract a female, he kind of pushes his eyes, or it's more like all the way out to the side of his head, so he looks like a letter T. And then there's this bird called the sage grouse, and it does this very bizarre mating dance where he kind of flops the whole front of his body up and down while making this weird sound like a coffee percolator. You can see both of those on YouTube if you look them up. Anyway, this is called Things I've learned about love. Don't try to tell me love is blind. It has one glaring eye smack in the middle like the hand of Miriam, or like the sense-defying stalk-eyed fly. It puffs its transparent head full of air, then pumps its eyes 6 feet out to the side, a grotesque, all-seeing capital T, always on the lookout for new suckers. Don't tell me love is selfless. I've seen it stomp and preen and do the sage grouse strut, popping its floppy breast up and down, whooping, "We want women!" and waggling its tail feathers right in my face, clamoring for attention like a bullfrog's ba-rop, ba-rop. You don't have to tell me love is strange. I know all about its misfit menageries, its vault of horror comic books, the skivvies made of wriggling eels it wears beneath its sailor suit. Grandiose antlers don't impress me anymore. When love dances on one leg and bellows for its mate, I've learned how to block its calls. And I'll read 2 more shorter ones. This is one of several poems in the book that is about poetry itself. It's called What Poetry Is. It's an oddball. It's bioorganic. It's a prickly pear. It's a criminal conversation. It's an island of northwest Scotland noted for its tweeds. It's April Fool's Day. It's a trampoline. It's an instrument for recording variations in tension. It's a shoot 'em up. It's fortified wine. It's a soft, malleable, and highly toxic element. It's a third eye. It's Peck's bad boy. It's an arboretum. It's a temporary suspension of breathing. It's strong, stout, sturdy, tough, stalwart, and tenacious. It's an ejection seat. It's an embassy. It isn't what you think it is. It's in spite of everything. And I'll end with this one, which is the last poem in the book. It's called This Much We Know. All disasters begin inside tiny padlocked boxes. The periodic table is dissolving before our eyes. Therefore, the Taj Mahal will become a hotel for ghosts. All women secretly want to be Theodore Roosevelt, but none would be caught dead in this centipede bikini. Therefore, who am I to dip my fingers in boiling oil? No cathedral of exhaustion has spires that point sideways. An imploding neutron star can't dance on the head of a godsend. Therefore, we must all till the feudal fields of sleet. All human beings compare themselves to battlefields. All fallen warriors are reborn as shards of silence. No man is an island, but some women are. Consequently, our hearts turn so easily into ladders. Therefore, the world politely refuses to end. Thanks very much.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Some very inspiring work tonight, and lovely work. So I want to. So I'll ask, like, how long did it take you to write each of your works? And we could start with Bo and then go to Pam. How long did it take you to finish the novel, and how long did it take you to put that wonderful book of poetry together?
Yeah, mine, I
So,
think
Bo, would you like to start?
sure. Mine took about a year, I believe, maybe a little over a year for the actual writing. The editing process has been even longer. What a process it is to go through an entire novel. But yeah, I think the actual work of writing took about a year. Without a doubt, the biggest body of work. I typically worked in much more short form capacities, whether that was actually doing kind of advertising copywriting, or I'd written a lot of short stories before, but the novel had always seemed very daunting. So I literally took it one chapter at a time. I figured if I could get one chapter, that would be as far as I ever got. And then I finished one chapter and I said, I'll do it. If I do two chapters, that'll be as far as I ever got. And then that turned into 13 chapters, and that was the entirety of the book. So
Wow. So you just did it one chapter at a time, pretty
I had
much.
a general outline in my head, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to go one chapter at a time, unless you're starting with the first chapter and then writing the last chapter. But had an idea for where it was supposed to go, but other than that, yeah, I had to take it one chapter, one paragraph, one sentence at a time.
And that's the only really you could write is just like one word at a time. And
Exactly.
Pamela, how long did it take you to write that wonderful book of poetry?
Well, it's really kind of a collection of poems that just kind of started building up over the years. I'm not a very prolific writer. I'm very slow, and it was always hard for me when I was working. All of my uncreative writing jobs, like Bo, that it was very hard to spend time on my writing as I want to. But when I finally retired a few years ago, I was able to get more into it. And I just got to the point where I said, okay, I have more than enough poems to make another book. Now, which ones do I want to put into it? And during the pandemic, a lot of us weren't going outside that much. And so it really was a good time to kind of sit together and put this whole manuscript together.
Yeah, the pandemic seems to have inspired a lot of work. So let's talk about writing process. How did you both of you approach writing, especially since you both had or retired from writing jobs? I also do a writing job during the day. So how do you approach your creative work? Do you set a particular time, write for an hour, do a word count every day? Sometimes it's hard to do the slog. So, Bo, let's start with you. What is your process?
Yeah, definitely challenging, especially when you have a writing job. It can get very tedious. I had kind of heard that a great place to start, at the very least, is to try and write to kind of a word count, or at least like a page a day, something to that effect. Definitely had a couple or more than a couple of days where I would get up and write first thing in the morning before work, or go into work early when no one was there and write for an hour. Again, I'm grateful at the very least that I do have a writing job where when I have Microsoft Word open on my computer, nobody really thinks twice about that when I'm sitting at my desk. So there was a lot of that going on.
I think we've all been there. Definitely.
I'm glad I didn't have to have
And
Excel
Pam,
open.
talk about yeah.
What
Pam, talk about your process.
breaking up?
I mean, now that you're retired, it might be different, but oh, okay. So let's talk about your process. Do you want to talk about your process?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I was having trouble here. You were kind of breaking up. Well, when I was,
Oh, sorry.
well, it's not your fault. It's technology. Um, when I was working full time at these very, high pressure writing and magazine editing and freelance writing jobs with very, very long hours and crazy deadlines, a lot of times I would just be too tired to really do any serious writing until weekend, and I sort of became a Sunday poet, and I would write all day Sunday, and I said, I really hate this. So one of the great things about being retired is I can sit down there on a Tuesday and I can work on a poem, and if it doesn't quite work out, I could take another shot on it tomorrow. I mean, I do go out and do things. I don't just sit there and do nothing but write. I'm usually am kind of a late morning to early afternoon writer, and then I kind of start running out of steam and I call it a day. But sometimes at night I'll just be, watching TV or something, and then something I was stuck on during the day will come to me. So it's kind of a weird process.
Yeah, I think that the creative process is kind of a weird process. So let's talk about ideas. So I really fell in love with Eudora. She's a no nonsense woman. Is she based on anyone in particular, or is she a conglomeration of or a compilation of a number of people? And what makes her the shotgun woman?
Yeah, Eudora is definitely a combination of a few people. I think big inspiration for the character came from both of my grandmothers on both sides of my family. You know, people who grew up during that Great Depression era. I think both of them were extremely tough and resilient. Um, no nonsense, because I don't think at that time you could really afford to be engaging in too much nonsense. And so, yeah, I think it's definitely an amalgamation of both, kind of a merging of those two personalities. And then, it being set in Texas, I think the novel, I'm not sure if I preface this, but the novel is set in the 1950s in Texas, and Texas itself is a very harsh and unforgiving environment. And I think especially during that time, I'm not sure how many people had air conditioning back then. It was a rough place to be, and not for the faint of heart. And so that's definitely that the character of Eudora is at home in that environment, born and raised there, and and I think it has a big impact on kind of who you are as a person. Yeah, the namesake of the shotgun woman. I think there's a saying in Texas, and I'm sure in other places in the South, where someone might be described as a pistol. It means someone who's maybe likely to fly off the handle a little bit, slightly unpredictable, and maybe prone to violence in some capacity. Might be described as they're a real pistol to deal with. And so I like the idea of the shotgun woman. What is more dangerous than someone who's described as a pistol? Perhaps they'd be described as a sawn-off shotgun, perhaps. So that's kind of where the namesake came from.
Well, a great title for a novel. I know my interest is piqued right away because I definitely wanted to get to know Eudora very well. And like in this first chapter, you set up so much of it, but we don't really know anything about her other than she's brusque and obviously not poor because of a lot of holdings of land, but also very practical. her ideas of religion were actually hilarious. So all that characterization work must have taken a good deal of thought and time to do. So, Pam, I want to know where the idea of the wombat slide came from.
I don't remember. I think it came from a mishearing of something on the radio. One of my poetry mentors, the late great Chicago poet Paul Carroll, once said that anything misheard is a poem. So I think I heard something. What did he say? That grease wombat? And it turned out it was something else, but I liked the sound of those words. A lot of my ideas come from just playing around with words. And I also think that
well, that was pretty clear in your poetry. I said that was pretty clear in your poetry.
Yeah.
The cento or the stento was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
How long have you been writing? Like, what inspired you to become a writer? Whether it's whether it's writing nonfiction or ad copy for advertising or magazines or whatever. So, when did you know the writing bug had bitten you? I guess we'll start with Pamela for that one.
Well, it was pretty young, definitely during my childhood. Both of my parents were writers. My mother did public relations work, and that involves a lot of writing. And my father was a professor of economics. He actually won the Nobel Prize for economics in 1990, but that's a digression.
Oh, wow.
He wrote a lot of books. And he always had a lot of jokes in his books. He kind of always liked to leave them laughing. So I was just always into writing. And when I went off to college, excuse me, I thought I wanted to be a journalism major. And then after a while, I switched my major to English literature. And then as part of that, I took a creative writing class, and it was like, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I was kind of closing in on it. And I remember reading newsletters, business newsletters, where people said, never hire poets to do, corporate writing or commercial writing. But I think being a poet, really made me better as a marketing, communications, or PR writer.
Yeah, I would have to agree that there's definitely a command of the language that is unfortunately missing these days. And Bo, what inspired you to actually go down this path of writing?
Yeah, I think
as a profession.
I think I'll give a shout out to my dad. My dad, I think, is a fantastic writer. His birthday cards are always very, very. I mean, they're excellent always. And my dad used to leave famous quotes in our room. He would write them out and then pin them up, and they were always very eloquent. And I think he has an amazing grasp on that. And another big influence that I think he brought into my life was a love of cinema, and a lot of this book in particular was inspired by the classic spaghetti western. So the old Clint Eastwoods and the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West. And I remember watching all of these, and I think that genre of film especially is really rooted in like really interesting stories, obviously of a Western genre, but it's all about the character and the story and the showdown at the end. You know, they follow a certain cadence, but the ones that really were able to transcend the genre and become like classic film were ones that had a great story and great characters that carried it. And yeah, I think kind of even in just watching all of those, you know, I love literature, and I was an English minor and did a lot of short story writing, and I definitely have like my literary heroes. But you know, in a lot of writing this book, I kind of thought in scenes, like in cinematic scenes, like, okay, you open on Eudora in her lawyer's office, and what do they say? You know, what is the dialogue that kind of takes place there? And so definitely in working through this book, I don't know if I maybe approached it as a traditional writer. I'm not sure what that process would be exactly, but I definitely approached it almost as it was a movie or a film in my head, and then my job was to kind of transcribe that in the format of a novel. I think that helped me a lot in the writing. But yeah, I think I definitely think, yeah, the film played a big part of it, and my dad's a natural. He should write the next novel, so next great American novel.
Yeah, Bo,
So I
I
have
thought
two questions for you. Number one is
very visual.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yes.
really gave people things to see, which some fiction writers do not do enough of. So that would made it very vivid.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's even.
Yeah, I agree. It was vivid, and also the tension was high right away.
Yeah.
Excellent.
There was a lot of tension. So my other question is, how comfortable were you writing from the point of view of a woman character, as opposed to a male character, especially in a Western that's male dominated? So, did you do character bios of Eudora and your other characters? Like, how did you nail the character of Eudora, and also the characterization of the lawyer was pretty vivid as well.
Yeah, that was definitely something I had to take pretty seriously. I thought there was just a very unique riff on the classic, exactly like you said, the classic Western protagonist is a man that probably looks like Clint Eastwood, tough guy, you know. And I thought it would be an interesting twist to use a lot of the thematic elements of a Western, but have a woman as the protagonist, and almost feature a woman as like the tough guy in the story, because I knew, again, like my grandmothers were both that. They were actually even a relative on my wife's side. There's a photo of her grandmother smoking a big stogie, playing poker at the table. So I kind of wanted to use that as the inspiration. And I think as far as like the character bios, again, going back to that idea that most of the time truth is stranger than fiction, and a lot of the great characters in life are most of the time are real people. Again, my novel is set in the 50s in a small town in Texas. That was the whole inspiration for that town comes from a real place.
I think both.
The inspiration for that came from a real place and real people who inhabited that town. So I think I got lucky with a lot of the characterization, as I just had to write about people that I had heard and seen and encountered it in this real life place.
So, Pam, there's a comment for you. It says, "Big dumb me being a teacher again." Ted Berrigan said that, but Paul quoted it a lot. Don't know what that means, but maybe
That's my husband. Pay no attention. No, he was right. I forgot. Because, I took all these workshops with Paul Carroll. And he always used to say that, but Richard is reminding me that actually Ted Berrigan originally said that, but Paul and Ted Berrigan were friends.
So what was he referring to? Said what? Was it about the Cento or the Grease Wombat? What is he referring to?
Oh, when I said that I thought Paul Carroll said everything misheard is a poem. When I got
I see.
hearing something. Kenneth Koch, another one of the late great Kenneth Koch, one of my big influences, has this book called Wishes, Lies, and Dreams about teaching poetry to children in public schools. And he had one lesson that one of his students was trying to write a swarm of bees, but he wrote a swan of bees. And Koch said, that's actually a really good image, a swan of bees, because it like a swan could be made out of bees, and that's really much more original. So I actually use that exercise a lot when I am trying to get ideas, like a this made of that and that made of this, and that kind of, a broom of carrots.
So what is the exercise in case some of our writer friends who are listening may want to do it? What is the exercise?
Oh, well, it's like you think of words and phrases that this made of that, a car of, no, God, I'm not good with doing it off the top of my head, but like a house of lavender.
That's okay, but I think we get the idea.
Yeah.
That sounds actually nice. A house of lavender.
Yeah.
I think Cat Stevens may have done that in some of the lyrics of his poetry. One of his songs has a house made of barley rice. So
okay, see, there you go.
So Bo, is there another novel inside you? Are you working on anything more? Or are you just basically focused on birthing this baby? And the same for Pam. Do you have another poetry book as well inside you that you're working on while this one is trying to be born? Is there another novel in you?
Yeah, I'm focusing on getting this one done. Gonna see how that goes.
Okay.
This was definitely one that had been rattling around in my brain for a long time. I do have a few other leads, some inspiration on different things that I'm exploring. But yeah, definitely gonna see this one through, get it out there, and then once it's out there, I'll start seeing if there's any other threads to chase down. But I'm sure there's something in there. But once the editing process is complete on mine, then I can start looking at some new material.
And Pam, what about you?
Well,
you already have 5 volumes out there.
Yeah. Well, during the pandemic, like I said, I was just kind of writing like mad. And about 5 years ago, I took a workshop on how to combine visual art with your poetry, which is something I always wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. So after that, I started doing a lot of visual poetry where I take these kind of strange free use stock photos and I write a poem in response to it, and then I kind of insert the poem into the photo. So I did a whole kind of chapbook of those where I used kind of strange photos of guys. And that one is called Mr. Mischief. And that's the one that's forthcoming from Dancing Girl Press sometime this year. I'm not sure exactly when. And now I'm working on another visual poetry book, which is called Ghost Stories, which is basically what it sounds like. And using a lot of sort of creepy looking pictures.
We're almost at. I'm amazed at the perseverance and the work ethic that both of you show. We're almost at time. So, are there any words that you want to give to aspiring writers or aspiring writers who are trying to be published? Any words of advice that you want to give them, the folks who are listening, as to how to stay the course? Whoever wants to go first.
Oh, gee.
Well, I can go, Pam. You can think about it.
Let's see.
I would say, yeah, I think what you said at the very end there. Stay the course is an underrated piece of advice. I think it's a very long process, no matter what you're doing, whether you do write short form or you're attempting long form. There's the process of writing itself, and then the many rounds of editing. Yeah, it's a long process. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you just have to keep working at it every day. And again, I think that's kind of cliche advice, but I think that any great endeavor kind of requires that same type of fortitude in your effort. It has to be carried out over a long period of time. And then as far as the publishing itself goes, I would advise the exact same mindset when approaching that. I had submitted many things for publication since I was in college writing, and have received an inordinate amount of rejections. But as they say, it only takes one. And so here I am sitting in my reading for my forthcoming novel. It only takes one. So hang in there and just keep going.
Bravo. And Pam?
Well, I think one thing I'd say was that it really kind of helps to be part of a community of writers, and so you're not just sitting at your lonely desk alone. And also, I think you shouldn't try to write in a vacuum. So I think it's just very helpful to be involved with other poets, be in a good workshop, and kind of learn from what other people are doing, and they can support you and you could support them. As far as getting poetry published in magazines or getting a book published, a lot of times it's really about getting a publisher or a magazine that's the right fit, rather than just sending stuff out to anybody and anyone. It's so easy now. When I, I'm so old. When I first started, there wasn't an internet. You had to kind of buy all these magazines to kind of see what kind of poems certain magazines publish. But now, it's so easy to just go to a magazine's website and look at the kind of stuff that they publish and see if that would be a good fit for you. And the same with, with book publishers, small press book publishers. You can really kind of research what kind of books they've published and what they seem to be looking for, and that's really helpful.
All very, very excellent advice. So writers out there, if you're listening, that's stuff you could take to the bank. So I want to let everyone know that Pamela's book, How Do the Greased Wombat Slide, and Beau's book, Shotgun Woman, are available for pre-order on the Unsolicited Press's website under pre-order. So if you want to finish or you want to pre-order the book and be one of the first to get these when they're published, definitely do go check out the website for Unsolicited Press, which is www.unsolicitedpress.com. Also would like to remind everyone that in May, we're going to have more than one, we're going to have more than two. Our next readings is on the 15th, and then there's another one on the 29th. We hope you'll join us for both. And with that, we say thank you so much for joining us, and good night. Good night, everyone. And thank you, Beau and Pam, for joining us. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.